Hey everyone, so I wanted to talk about something that I personally name utility workflows. It's not really like an Nintex term, it's just something that type of workflow that I like to build. And it could have been in Nintex Workflow on-prem, Office 365, and now I want to show you an example of doing this in Nintex Workflow Cloud. So what you guys are saying right now is an Nintex Workflow Cloud environment, and I have a few workflows in here. What we're talking about here in regards to a utility workflow is basically a workflow that's going to do some work for us that is kind of like a utility. I want to be able to use it all over the place, and I want to be able to use it in other workflows. So very similar to kind of like the concept of user-defined actions, but it's a little different in that user-defined actions, you had input and output parameters. With these types of utility workflows that I'm talking about, they only have input parameters. So basically you tell it to go and do something and it goes and does something, right? In the future, we actually will have some functionality around input and output parameters. That's something that's coming. So for now, this is the way I like to do things. All right. So what we're doing is we're kind of building a reusable little process. And in my example in this blog post is some type of contract management process. And at the end, whether the contract was approved or declined, I want to go and do some work. And usually it's going to be I want to send an email back to the initiator and let them know that it was approved or rejected, or what the next steps might be. So let's kick this off really quickly. I'm going to click on create workflow. This will bring up the workflow designer. And here we go. Now the first thing you want to do is start off with, and you can do this later if you want, but it's really nice to kind of kick it off straight away, is that click on this start event node, and that brings up the start event configuration. And what we're dealing with here is Nintex as the connector, and we're going to do an external start. And you can see here we can add some start event variables. So for example, it might be to address, and it's text, and then we might do company, contract type, and we'll do status, which basically is approved or declined. All right, done, and we click on close. Now you'll notice the little orange symbol on the left of this has disappeared. So now we have close to a working workflow. Now, the next thing I want to do is I'm going to send an email. Oops. On a different, slightly different email depending on what the status is. So in this case, we'll do a branch by condition again. See that little warning symbol or the little gear, basically not configured. So we'll come in here and say status. If it's equal to, I'm going to ignore case and just say approved. We're going to go down the right branch. If it's rejected or declined, it'll go down the left branch. All right, there's that really simple thing. And then we're going to send an email. Let's actually do that over here. For the email address, you can click on this variable here and insert the to address. So pretty straightforward. That was one of our input parameters. Subject line, you could say, oops, not status, contract type. Contract type was approved. And then you can insert some text in here. Again, you can insert the company name, contract type, all that sort of stuff, right? And then what I'll do is I'll copy it and I'll paste it over here. Click in here and I'm going to say declined. Whoa. Declined. Okay, so this should be approved and this should be declined. Okay, pretty straightforward. You can see it's a pretty simple workflow, but what this means is that I'm not going to have these three actions configured in my workflow and necessarily configured a number of times in the same workflow or a number of different workflows, because you can see this little bit of logic is pretty much reusable for different types of contracts, etc. Okay, now what I'm going to do is actually close this because I'm not going to publish this. I already have a workflow that looks just like this. And let's see, here we are here. I actually have renamed some of these actions, like is approved, so I know I'm going to go down this branch, and this is approved email and a declined email. And you'll notice it looks a little nicer in regards to the email that gets sent out. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward, right? Now, When you publish this, you actually get all the external start information, and that's what you need for any other workflows that you're going to use. So let's go over here, and here is my contract notification utility workflow. So what I tend to do is call these workflows with utility workflow at the end. That way I know this is not a normal workflow, this is more of a reusable workflow. So notice the start event is external start, production, it's published. I come over here, click on this drop down and click on external start URL. And you'll notice there's a bunch of stuff in here. I will look at the stuff at the bottom under the REST call. So take into consideration or take a note of this URL with token, and that you can copy that. There's the request header content type, and there's also the request content parameters. And this is the actual input parameters, right? So there's the status, company, contract type, and to address. And what I tend to do is when I use this is actually empty out this callback URL because I'm not going to be using that part of it. Okay, so this is so basically have this open in a tab that you're going to use, and then you can copy this to like a OneNote or wherever it is that you want to keep for later on. Now, I'm going to jump to this workflow. This is just a regular workflow, and you can see I just have it started off a very simple public form that I'm going to be using. Okay, now all we're doing here is, now there's going to be a lot more work in this particular workflow, but I'm going to have a call web service action, and this is how you configure it. The URL is basically that URL with token. That's what the URL is. The request type is an HTTP post. The request header is applications/JSON. And then request content is the entire content over here that I've just copy and pasted. I've actually just hard coded some values in here, so it doesn't really mean you have to use these. You can click in here, click on variable, insert some variable or something like that. And for now, I'm actually just ignoring the responses. So, and you can see the callback URL, I blanked that out. Pretty straightforward. Okay, so when you actually run this workflow, it's going to kick off this action, which will then kick off that, this little workflow here, this child utility workflow. Now, the interesting thing about this is not necessarily just a utility workflow. This could be an actual full-on workflow that you kick off from some external system. So it's kind of interesting that you can do this, because it's not just a matter of these are going to be events kicked off based on, say, Salesforce or something in Dropbox or OneDrive, etc. This could be based off of events from some third-party application that you guys have built. So pretty interesting you can do that. Okay, the final thing I want to say is in my blog post at the bottom, there is a workflow ID for that particular utility workflow, just so you guys can have a look at what it looks like. And if you want to import it in, go to this page on Nintex Workflow Cloud, and on the right here, you click on import, and notice there's the workflow key there, and you just give it a name. So if I want to show you how to export it, simply go over here, click on export, there's the name of the workflow, you click on generate, and there's your workflow key. All right, so copy that. I've got it in the bottom of my blog post, so you take that. Let's say you copied it from my blog post, come in here, click on import, go over here and paste it. Oops, not double paste, paste it in here, and just go test utility workflow or whatever you want to call it. Click on import, and then you'll have a new workflow. Right, there it is, test utility workflow. I now have a new workflow. It imports as draft, so I can click on this, and it'll bring up the designer, and I'll be able to tweak it as I need to. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to add it to the bottom of the blog post. If you have any suggestions, if you have any comments on what kind of utility workflows you guys have built, let me know. I'm really curious to see what people are building out there. Thanks for your time, and hope you found this useful.